friends, in the series which we are doing on the making of contemporary India 1950 to 1990s, today we will talk about foreign policy and the making of the non-alignment part 2. In the earlier lecture in which we talked about the foreign policy and the making of the non-alignment, we talked about the objectives of the Indian foreign policy and how non-aligned movement was a central characteristic of the Indian foreign policy after its independence. We talked about the idea of Panchsheel, which was enunciated in 1950s, and how it was also very important in that framework, that how the peaceful coexistence of the different nations of the world was very, very important at that point of time. We also talked about the kind of various conferences which were held in different countries at that point of time, and finally the Belgrade Conference, where the non-aligned movement was talked about. And we felt that in that particular context, India also realized that how the various kinds of remnants of colonialism, they would in a way give way soon, and how world was trying to prevent any kind of a nuclear war. But at the same time, it was also to be kept in mind that the economic interests of India, they were also to be maintained and managed, and India could not be party to any of the power blocks or superpower blocks. And India at the same time felt that when India became independent, India had different kinds of needs. So the needs of India from that point of view can be taken care of by the different power blocks, and how India at that point of time, being a poor country because the 200 years of colonial rule had divested India of so much resources, so much money, that India, being a very rich land, became comparatively very, very poor, and there was no economic kind of a development in agriculture or industry. All the sectors of the economy, they were struggling, and India felt India needed a lot of support from different countries in terms of technology, machine, food, etc. And when they will be provided, then India will in over a period of time become more and more self-sufficient in nature. So India felt that if for its own needs, India had to go to different countries, and thereafter that is how we see that how the Indian needs in the framework of Air Force, Navy, Army, etc., they were being these needs, they were met by purchases from France, UK, Soviet Union and US. So in a way, India was trying to cater to its own problems in that way, that it was able to seek support from other countries, and all the countries of the world, from whichever country suited India in that context, India was ready to procure material from them. And at the same time, we also see that licenses, they were also being obtained from the various foreign countries to produce equipment, so that over a period of time India will also become self-sufficient. And how when India will seek these kinds of defense equipments from these countries, then some kind of relations will also be in a way followed by the Indians and the other country which was supplying these weapons. So, but at the same time, India also realized that India did not have to be dependent on any one country in this way, and how these kinds of problems relating to the underdevelopment, they could only be taken care of when India is able to maintain its independence and autonomy in the different in the international sphere. So we find that how at different points of time various countries of the world, they helped India, and especially in 1960s we find that how India came comparatively very closer to the Soviet Union, and how Soviet Union was able to support India not only in the Indian context in terms of borrowing of the idea of 5-year plans or providing support to the industrialization efforts, but at the same time when you see the case of India in the context of the food security, then India was able to seek support from US as well. The Green Revolution was an example where India was able to seek support from the United States in terms of introducing the Green Revolution technologies which were able to boost the production and productivity in India. So, we find that various kinds of agreements at different international levels, be it in the framework of defense, be it in the framework of food security, India realized and felt that it could seek this kind of a support, and these countries at different points of time were also ready to support India, that India was allowed to pay back in terms of rupees rather than dollars, and India could save those dollars for its other kinds of consumption or other kinds of payments which it had to make. So, this kind of approach, we find that India was able to maintain active profile in the multilateral bodies, and it was sought continuously to use her presence there to her advantage. And India also felt after independence that to stay within the Commonwealth, and how India could in a way get some kind of a support or benefit when it is part of a multinational body. So, we find that India not only was part of the Commonwealth, but at other multinational bodies, other such conferences or such kind of bodies, India felt that it should speak its own mind, irrespective of the fact that whether other big political powers are able to in a way come to some sort of an agreement with India. But India was in a way trying to be fearless in this particular aspect, and India felt that how when it will be the member of the Commonwealth, so it will have that kind of a security where it will be able to decide its own friends and enemies that way. And we also find that how in UN as well, India was ready to play a bigger role, and when India was part of the different peacekeeping operations across the world, and when India became part of these peacekeeping operations, it was trying to give its best shot, and the part of a force where the different kinds of soldiers or different soldiers of different nationalities, they also came. So, we find that during this particular period, for example, for instance, when the issue of Korea war was there, and that issue came up after the Second World War, and how we find that North and South Korea, both these countries, and there was some kind of a conflict, not only from the ideological point of view, but in the context of the kind of intervention or interference the different foreign nationalities of the world they wanted to make. And we find that the North Korea was in a way controlled by the socialist camp, and South Korea, it was dominated by the Western powers. So, apart from the ideological kind of an issue, we find that interference of the different countries in the Korea war was also central, and India personally felt that the Western powers, they should not in a way try to interfere in the internal affairs of the country. And KPS Menon, who was elected chairman of the UN Commission on Korea in late 1947, had in his report to UN appealed to the great powers to let Korea be united, warning that else Korea may blow up, but it was to no avail. So, KPS Menon made his own effort at that point of time, and he talks about the unity of Korea in that sense, that if the Western powers or the great powers, if they will try to interfere, then Korea may not be able to support itself in that way. And we find that when North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, India supported US in the UN Security Council. It condemned North Korea as an aggressor, and it called for a ceasefire. And in that case, when we try to see that initially India was trying to India supported US, but at the same time, at the later part, we find that India did not support US on the same issue in the later times, when he felt that the Western powers were trying to interfere too much there. And Korea War in a way also tested the faith of India in the non-alignment and to its own commitment, and how initially India felt some kind of a pressure or hostility from the China and Soviet Union, and later when it did not support America, then China and USSR, both of them, they realized the importance of the non-aligned stand which India had taken. So, we find that in the later part India refuses in a way to go along with the Western intervention, and it did not declare China to be the aggressor. And in 1950 we find that how in meantime China was in a way able to invade Tibet, and it annexed Tibet. So, it was not to the liking of India, but the stand of the foreign policy did not change, despite the fact that at that point of time Tibet was taken away by China. And we find that when finally some kind of an end to the Korea War could be seen during this time, then the way India behaved, the way India tried to communicate its own stand, it was realized by the other nations, and they had to even recognize the way the same boundary which India they were trying to change, because India was talking in that particular framework. And they also realized that it was not any kind of a cowardly neutrality or any kind of a situation where idealist hogwash could be seen in the framework of the non-alignment. So, when after this war we find that the position of India in the eyes of USSR comparatively changes, and PM Bulganin, he even told Indian ambassador KPS Menon that USSR fully appreciated India's position in the Commonwealth and hoped that India would continue to remain in it. So, initially USSR had this kind of a notion that when India is being part of the Commonwealth, so that was not the right kind of an approach, because India was in a way trying to support imperialism. But when when USSR saw that India could take its own stand, they felt that India was not any kind of a India was not trying to support any one power bloc. Rather, India was trying to see an individual situation from its own perspective at that point of time, and it was ready to call a spade a spade. It was ready to say the things which India felt were to be correct. So, this kind of a situation in the framework of USSR, where it was seen that how when India became part of the Commonwealth, so the membership of India in the Commonwealth at that point of time, it was realized that India was not succumbing to any kind of Western imperialism. Rather, in a way, India was taking its own stand, and the Western powers and the other powers of the world, they had to see India in their from a different lens if they want to see its own see India's characteristic, because India was ready to take a stand, though it may not be liked by one power bloc, but India was ready to convey its own particular ideas regarding a particular international issue. So, apart from the Korea War, we find that Indochina was another issue in early 1954, and it could also become some sort of a theatre of war against communism, and how US was ready to provide all sort of support to the French colonial power in the war with Viet Minh. So, we find that how Nehru his initiative to appeal for a ceasefire in February 1954 was followed up by his obtaining the support of several Asian leaders at Colombo Conference in April 1954 for his 6-point proposal for a settlement. So, how India was trying to in a way call a conference that way, how it was trying to negotiate the issues in the international sphere, and India became independent only in 1947, but at the same time India was realizing its own worth, and how foreign policy initiative of India in the context of different countries. And we also find that how to communicate the point of view of Asia in the Geneva conference, Krishna Menon was sent there so that he could put India's stand. It could, though India was not invited to this conference, but India sent one of the representatives, so he could in a way communicate the stand of India. And we also find that Nehru's meeting with Zhou Enlai in 1954 in Delhi, and the kind of behind the scene parleys and other assurances, they helped prevent the further internationalization of the Indo-Chinese conflict. So we find that not only at the forums where some kind of an exchange of ideas was to take place, but behind the scene activities or talks or assurances, they were also taking place, and India was an important kind of in a way India was an important country that way, which was trying to bring something new, in that sense that without thinking from its in the context of trying to align with any one country, India was thinking from a clear headed approach where its own particular stand was comparatively clear. And we also find that Pierre Mendès France, who was the French PM, he talked about in the Geneva conference that this 10-power conference, 9 at the table and India. So Bipin Chandra talks about the role of the negotiations, that how India was a significant country, and it was also realized by the people, those who were participating in such kind of conferences. Apart from that, we also see not only the issue of Indochina, but at the same time other important issues which were also at that point of time came in, especially in 1950s, when you talk about the issue of Suez Canal. And in 1956 we find that Egypt, it nationalized the Suez Canal, and it nationalized the Suez Canal in the kind of reaction in the context of the way US and Britain, both of them, they were trying to create some kind of pressure on Egypt, and how the Anglo-American withdrawal of the promised financial aid for building Aswan Dam on River Nile. So Egypt was given this kind of a pressure that both these countries now they will not provide any kind of assistance to them in terms of building a dam. And Suez Canal, in a way all of us are aware that how it was an important concern or a significant concern from the framework of the transport and communications, how it shortened the distance between different countries of the world. And when it would be nationalized, India was definitely in the favor of Egypt, that as an independent country it had this kind of a mandate where it could nationalize the Suez Canal. And the people, those who were using, or the countries which were using the Suez Canal, they wanted that the international control of the Suez Canal should be there, and it should not be with Egypt. But India itself was one of the major users of Suez Canal, but it realized that the Constantinople Convention of 1888 it in a way recognized that the Suez Canal was the integral part of Egypt. So we find that how during this particular period India was trying to communicate with the various countries of the world, and it in a way urged both Cairo and London to observe restraint, and it tried at the London conference in August 1956 to get agreement on a formula that included the Egyptian control, an advisory role for the users, and settlement of disputes in accordance with the UN Charter. So all this was being talked about, and Egypt and other countries, they were also in widespread approval of the suggestions which were being made by India. And we also find that when Britain and France, they got Israel to attack Egypt, and they landed their troops in Suez, then they were condemned by US and UN. And thereafter we find that this withdrawal takes place, and Indian forces, they also in a way participated in the peacekeeping forces. So India was trying to support different countries' interest at different points of time, and we also find that at the later time Britain also accepted the fairness of Indian approach, and Indo-British relations, they were not affected despite the kind of stand which was taken by India, and how India also helped Congo in maintaining its own independence, and how when we find that after independence of Congo from Belgium, the rich copper province of Katanga, it announced the independence from Congo, and we find that different kinds of nations, they were trying to support the local leaders, and how they can be used in a way for their own interest. That was also one of the concerns at that point of time, and we find that when all these foreign political powers, they had their own favorite players and they wanted to meddle and create such kind of a situation, and India played some kind of a decisive role in this, and it talked about various kinds of issues which were relating to Congo, and being part of UN, how mercenaries and foreign troops, they could be wiped out from that particular place, and civil war could be stopped, and a new form of government was to be established, and India was ready to commit troops for it, and UN agreed for this, and with the support of the Indian troops, we find that civil war could be ended, and the control of the central government could be established in these regions which were having this kind of a turmoil, that was Katanga. So we find that it was one of the important periods in that context, and how non-aligned movement at that point of time, and India being one of the countries which was talking about non-alignment, and India was also practicing it at different international forums. In the framework of India's relations with the big powers, when you talk about USSR, US, which were seen to be the superpowers, then we find that India definitely wanted good relations with these countries, because India needed a lot of support from them in the framework of technology, machines, and a lot of aid for the development effort, food for the people, because India was not able to produce enough quantities of food, and a lot of moral support for its nation building and democratic efforts. So we find that India could in a way rely on United States for this purpose, because United States had that kind of technology, that kind of abundance which it could in a way try to support India. But we find that when India's relations with the US in the long run, that how India was supportive of communist China, and it was the first one to recognize China, and it also talked about giving representation to China in UN, and India in a way supported America in the Korean War in the first instance, but later it supported it did not it was not ready to consider China as an aggressor that way. So from that perspective, United States was not supportive initially of the kind of policy which was being followed by India, and at the same time we also see that US was in a way obsessed with communism, and it was not trying to see the situation which was the grey situation. It was not all that black and white. World was not divided only in the capitalist and the communist regime, but there were different kinds of political systems which were there, and India was in a way not ready to in a way toe one line for its own particular gains. Rather, India wanted to take some kind of a principled stand, keeping the international situation in mind, and India was also trying to suggest to other nations of the world that they should also maintain their own stand in the international affairs. But we also find that Indo-US relations, they were not in a way marked by some kind of a hostility, because friendly relations between the people, they existed, and the economic ties, they also grew, as US was one of the source of technology and machine. And later we find that Indo-US relations, there was a lot of some kind of an alteration when Nehru wanted to seek some kind of a support in 1962 from US when China attacked India, and Galbraith was the ambassador who in a way supported Nehru in that context. And India's relation with the Soviet Union, we also find that initially they were not all that warm, but over a period of time their relations they improved. And it was also because of the fact that how communists they were ambivalent towards the Indian freedom struggles and the leaders of the Congress. And Soviets also felt that how India's decision to stay in the Commonwealth was their surrender to imperialism. And over a period of time, when they saw the situation in India, when they saw the positioning of India in the international affairs, and we find that Soviet Union was the one who supported India at different international forums, including the UN, especially on the Kashmir issue. And Indians Prime Minister Nehru visited Soviet Union, and how Khrushchev and Bulganin, important leaders from Russia, they also visited India. And how cultural exchange in the framework of films like Avara became quite popular in Russia, and how Raj Kapoor became a household name in Russia. And this kind of a cultural exchange in the framework of films and the artist could also be seen, and how in the political sphere USSR was also trying to support India in the Security Council, especially on the issue of Kashmir. And we find that USSR also supported India in the context of integration of Goa as well, when the Portuguese control over Goa was there. And it also supported India in the context of the economic development, where especially in the industrialization of the heavy industry, where India did not find any kind of support from US, and how the Bhilai steel plant in 1956 was established, and other plants in Durgapur with the British support, and in Rourkela with the German support. And finally in the Bokaro we again find that USSR supported India. So we find that the relations between USSR and India they developed over a period of time, and with China we find that relations they deteriorated when the Dalai Lama from 1959 onwards sought refuge in India, and we find some kind of clashes on the Sino-Indian border as well. And finally in 1962 how China became an aggressor and attacked India. So this kind of a thing, that there might be different reasons for the Chinese attack, or the way India was trying to position itself by being non-aligned, how India was able to secure the support of USSR. And during this time we also find that how USSR supported India in the manufacture of the MiG aircraft, and when Sino-Indian conflict there, then USSR did not take any kind of a stand. It was a neutral. So that was an important gain from the Indian point of view, and at the same time Soviet Union also gained from the kind of support which it got from India. And these kinds of issues could be seen from these particular aspects. And from when we talk about the relations with the neighbors, then only apart from Pakistan, India did have good relations with Nepal, Burma, Sri Lanka, and so all these countries they had healthy kind of relations with India. And we find that the ideas of Panchsheel, all of them they are quite relevant even now. The ideas of nuclear disarmament which India talks about, all of them they have a lot of significance. So I would like to end the discussion here. Thank you very much.